Okay, so at this point, because I'm sure you don't want to hear me talk all morning, can I hand us over to our first speaker, our first expert by experience, who is Andrew Voyce. So Andrew.
Thank you, Dr. Brabham. Hello, my name's Andrew Voyce. I'm 60 years old and I was diagnosed with schizophrenia at the age of 23. As we're in the Imperial War Museum, can I tell you a wartime anecdote? When I was a patient at Headingley Asylum, I knew a guy whose claim to fame was that he'd been crossing a field near Hailsham in 1942 when he was machine gunned by a German fighter plane. He escaped by diving into a ditch. Only 5 feet tall and usually dressed in a grey suit, he also had the habit of looking down at gutters for dog ends. I was in Woolwich years later and I spotted a similar bloke looking at the gutters. So I asked him if he'd ever been machine gunned by a German fighter. He said no, but he had been machine gunned by a Japanese one 3 times in the Far East. Strange. There are lots of us people with schizophrenia, about 1% of the population, or approximately 600,000 people in the UK. That's more than 6 to capacity Wembley stadiums, a lot of people. And we all have friends and family. But we face stigma and discrimination. How does that affect us? It's okay to call someone a psycho, as happens sometimes in the media. Then it's also okay to make sure they go to the bottom of the pile. It's okay to favour others in housing, education, employment. It's okay to put someone with schizophrenia on a geriatric ward. And it's okay to have a go at them in public. The victims of schizophrenia, the sufferers and their loved ones, are blamed for a multitude of crimes and random acts of violence. The proposition is that the public need to be protected from us. However, I have to say that I haven't noticed a sensational headline for well over a year. I haven't received a Rethink Media alert about a headline in that time. That's a benchmark. Has the Time to Change anti-stigma campaign had an effect? Has the effort of Stuart Baker Brown and others in those video clips during Coronation Street made the media think again about stigmatising mental illness? Maybe it has, and I hope so. Another helpful recent development is the Equalities Act, which makes it unlawful to ask about medical histories in pre-employment questionnaires and until a job offer has been made. I think that gives people with time in hospital a better chance in the workplace. So how about me personally? Today I live a reasonable life. 30 years ago, I didn't lead a reasonable life. I was a revolving door psychiatric patient. So how did I break this pattern? How did I escape the revolving door? There was one key factor in my revolving door time: medication. When I was discharged from an asylum, I would be on depot injections. These injections in the backside caused severe side effects. An innocuous word, side effect, but the side effect of akathisia was most unpleasant. It produced restlessness day and night for 7 days after the injection. You couldn't think, you couldn't have a conversation, all you could do was be on the move, sedated at the same time. Akathisia, from the Greek for not to sit. My pattern was to avoid injections on discharge from the asylum, which would be a pleasant relief. But then I would become psychotic and live as a vagrant and have contact with the criminal justice system, with a return to the mental hospital. What would they do on readmission? Put me back on injections. And so the revolving door came about for me. The last time I was an inpatient was in 1991, and then I negotiated with the asylum not to have injections. Since then I've taken a tablet every day. I have not reoffended, I have not lived rough, and as far as I know I've not become psychotic or deluded, and I've not been a psychiatric inpatient. Another accompanying fact was that an act of social justice occurred. The asylums were closed, so there was no chance of me being subjected again to the revolving door. And who do I have to thank for this act of emancipation? It was Margaret Thatcher. She's not someone associated with social reform, but it was her who made the difference for me. So thank you, Mrs. T. I'm sure that if Headingley or Oakwood Asylums had still been open, I would have spent more time there over the last 20 years. There were bright spots during my revolving door time. For example, when I was first sectioned, detained under the Mental Health Acts, I appealed. At the appeal, the hospital managers would not allow me off section, but they did recommend that I start with the Open University. I felt this was the first time for years that anyone had faith in me, had confidence that I could reach an aspiration. That was in about 1981, and I did go on and to get a past BA with the OU in 1985. At that time too, I had a job in the City of London and bought a small house in Plumstead near here. It all fell to pieces, as multiple times before, when the independence of leaving a hospital to live in my own home in fact meant another chance to avoid medication, which again was offered only by injection. The dropping off of injections meant I again had no akathisia side effect, but that also I became psychotic. I lost my job, and after my house was repossessed on April Fool's Day 1986, I spent 5 years living in bus shelters. Before asylum life and after asylum life, I was never arrested, never charged and sentenced. I never lived as a vagrant. Brushes with the criminal justice system and living rough were part of my asylum life only, so I condemn that system. Another ray of hope was through the manager of the day centre where community care was available after my last inpatient episode. This was in Bexley in Sussex from 1991 to about 1998, and she supported me to gain an honours BA and an MA in social and public policy, and also reopened the relationship with my mother. This time there was no regression. I do not object to taking the pills I'm prescribed, and have hence avoided both psychotic symptoms and akathisia. I still keep my contact with the manager after her retirement, and sometimes visit her home. One thing that Margaret, she's Margaret Moss, not Margaret Thatcher, was not afraid to say was that the legitimacy of what she did came as much from the service user democracy that prevailed at the day centre as from the official hierarchy of the county council that she worked under. There have been a few caregivers that I'm proud to know. There are many daily acts of support. There are also big things, like with a now retired psychologist from the Maudsley, Jerome, who has encouraged me to contribute to 2 books and who is seeking to have my cartoons published as a graphic novel. We both studied at Reading University, a fine campus place of learning, and how empowering is that, to be helped to be published. I'm also on permitted earnings, maybe a way to independence even though I'm 60. I'm the founder member of a social enterprise and have the online presence of cartoons I've created, with help, about asylum life, with over 9,000 views in total. I am fortunate enough to contribute to literature on mental health. The social enterprise we started via a personal budget I was awarded, and I continue to get support and encouragement from Kenny at County Hall. It wasn't so much the 35 quid in my budget to pay for the company registration, it's been the confidence that this can come about from the commissioners at East Sussex County Council. We now put on drama workshops, yoga, dance exercise, music workshops, and feel better with a book. We went to the summer solstice at Stonehenge. I think that the personalisation agenda, the move towards user-led services, the involvement of the third sector, and moving a further step away from institutions can only be a good thing. Empowering individuals, respecting their informed choices. All of this was unavailable in the old days. What a waste of time asylum life was. If I can finish by mentioning the power of narrative for me. I've put down my story of mental illness in several ways. I wrote down my memory of the most severe period of psychosis for me, which was the 5 homeless years prior to my last hospitalisation, and I had that published. I've done a series of digital cartoons, which are now accessible under andrewsasylumlife.co.uk. Just Google it. I've written songs for our social enterprise music group Side Effects. All of this is a therapeutic activity, but it's also a point of catharsis. It means I can come to terms with these difficult and disempowering issues. I can admit these things happened to me, and I can share them and have closure. Sometimes my recollections are described as historical records. I certainly will be rewarded if others compose their version of their narrative, and for me, real page turns are the narratives, such as Anthony Scully's book, Eyebrows and Other Fish, which I've just read. So I'd like to end with a couple of verses from a song I wrote with the group Side Effects. It's about where we still may be today, but I hope this will be seen as an epitaph to a defunct media agenda. I'm fed up with those headlines in the Sun. You know it really isn't much fun. It wasn't my fault with the samurai sword. I just need something so I'm not bored. At least I'm not a schizophrenic. At least I'm not a schizophrenic. At least I'm not a schizophrenic. These split personality Jekyll and Hydes could be lurking anywhere, any place, any time. It could be you. It could be me. No one's safe. It's a lottery. At least I'm not a schizophrenic. At least I'm not a schizophrenic. At least I'm not a schizophrenic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was quite an incredible story, and one which must give hope to so many people who are living with schizophrenia too.